All right. Thank you for joining the Tips and Tricks webinar. Originally, Dr. Gabriel Gaske, our head of outreach, was supposed to give the webinar, but he's unable to do it today. He's traveling to DC, so I'm doing it instead. I'm Lenny Teytelman, also a scientist. I'm one of the co-founders of protocols.io, and it's a pleasure to be conducting the tips and tricks webinar. I will share the screen. We don't have too many slides. This is going to be pretty much exclusively a live demo of some of the nuances of the platform. That said, as we get started, just some housekeeping. So first of all, just a reminder that we are recording, and we'll share the recording to those who registered if you attended it, so you don't need to scribble notes or try to take screenshots. You'll have all of this. This is a sort of advanced webinar on protocols.io. If you just signed up, and it's your first time, you just created an account, you don't have an account yet, please note that we also have every month an introductory webinar in different time zone. If you're just getting started and you have specific questions on some basic functionality, you don't have to wait for the monthly webinar. We also have one-on-one demos that you can request. If you are a new user, please take advantage of these resources. And today we'll be focusing on some things that are not as easy to pick up. Most of the platform is very intuitive. You don't need a webinar, you can just start using it. But there is a lot of really cool functionality, like on your iPhone or Android phone, that you might only discover a year after you've started using. So we do want to highlight some of the things that might be useful, but not necessarily as intuitive and as easy to discover without a training session. So this is the agenda. We'll spend most of our time, we'll start and spend most of our time in the editor, looking at some of the bells and whistles in there. And there will be time for Q&A, but we don't have 100 people on the webinar. I think there's 15 of us right now, maybe a little bit more will join within the next couple of minutes, but you should feel free to add any questions. You should feel free to add any questions as we go along, and we'll make sure that we have plenty of time in terms of the Q&A at the end. All right, so with that, we're not in the Q&A yet. I'm just exiting out of the slides, and we'll get started with the demo. So if you already have an account, if you're signed in and you come to protocols.io, you should automatically, instead of the welcome page where you create an account and sign up, if you just come to protocols.io, you should end up in your workspace. We are in the protocols.io demo workspace. And what I'd like to start with is not the editor and lots of bells and whistles, as I promised. We'll get to that in a moment. But I'd like to start with just reminding, if you haven't seen our intro webinar, or if you don't know that you can already do it, just reminding you that not only can you create new protocols easily on protocols.io, but if you have a lot of existing protocols as PDF, Word files, Excel, please note that just like Dropbox, you can just drag and drop files in. So if your lab is just getting started on protocols.io and you have 30 protocols in your lab notebooks or in Dropbox, or in Google Docs, you can easily drag and drop into your workspace in Protocols.io, get them all in. And that should take no time. It doesn't take advantage of Protocols.io. It's more than like a file manager and a server, but at least you've gotten all of the protocols into the same space. If you have an extra minute for existing protocols, what we recommend is even if you don't have, I'm just going to put it in the demo group, I'm creating a new protocol. Even if you don't have the time to create a full protocol from scratch and enter all of the steps, and you just have a PDF, download it, and you just have a PDF file, instead of simply doing drag and drop, if you have an extra minute, create a protocol, and this will literally take you 30 seconds to a minute. Create the protocol, add the abstract of what this technique is. Any keywords that would help to make it discoverable. And if you don't have the time to go into the editor and enter the information step by step, scroll down to the bottom of the description tab and just attach the PDF, and just attach, drag and drop. You can drag and drop right into here or attach the PDF. So what's the difference from just taking your 10 protocols, creating a zip and putting it into your workspace in the file manager? Why do we recommend creating it? It's for discoverability. So if we go back to the file manager, this one is a PDF. This protocol has the PDF attached to it, but because we're putting in keywords, abstract, as the number of protocols grows, this will be much easier to discover. So if you're doing a search in this workspace, or across all of your workspaces, having the protocol in here as an attachment allows you to easily discover it. In fact, you can even publish it, not what we recommend, but a PDF document, you cannot just create a public link, but this, if you have 3 attachments and you put in the abstract, you could get a DOI, you could include it instead of supplementary, you can include it in your research publication. So it does become easy to share it without inviting people into your workspace, or maybe your collaborators outside of your research team. So those are the advantages of doing it as an attachment. And if and when time allows, just as a reminder, because we have versioning on Protocols.io, you can always come back, create a new version of the protocol, and then take advantage, even after you've published it, take advantage of all of our functionality and some of the things I'll be showing in a second, and go into the editor and add the step-by-step information. But if you have existing protocols, you have options for really quickly getting things in. And the next thing is we'll go into the editor on our test protocol. So we'll call it webinar test transformation protocol. And the next thing I want to show is, again, going along with the existing protocol theme, but imagine you have Microsoft Word. In this case, it's a Google Doc that we're working with. And I want to get it in to Protocols.io, taking advantage of the Protocols.io format. So instead of just copying and pasting everything into the guidelines, or, of course, I can take one step at a time and copy paste into Protocols.io, but that is laborious and time consuming. So what I want to show is that if you have existing steps instead of existing protocol, instead of creating them one by one, there is on the left-hand side the ability to insert steps from text. So if I click on that and I have an existing protocol, I'm going to go into the Google Doc, and I'm going to select all of this is for the step-by-step part of the protocol. I'm going to select those steps, paste them in here, and I'm going to say each number is a step, or you could have an existing protocol where each line is a step. You can also import Markdown, and I am going to click preview and say add to protocol. There we are. That took just a second, and I'm going back. I would grab the title, authors. Here's the abstract. Go back in. The abstract goes, as we already saw, in the description. And then I believe the other thing is we have before start information. So if you want a section with warnings, so before start, you would go to guidelines and warnings, and there's before start. So this took me, it's not a minute of just attaching the PDF, but you can see that this took only slightly longer, 3 minutes, to add the step-by-step information. Again, now I can publish it. Now you can find it and search based on the content in the steps. And this protocol now becomes runnable. You can use the protocols IO functionality that we would have described in the intro webinar and take much more advantage of what the platform has to offer. So those are the options for existing protocols. And now we're going to go into the editor and take a look at some of the components and functionality that, as I said, might not be as intuitive. The protocol we imported, I think, has sections. So here's section 1. Then we have starting step 5, section 2. If you haven't taken advantage of sectioning in protocols IO, it is very easy to do. So we're going to, in the editor, add sections to this protocol. And I'm going to say that this is down to section, this section goes to step 5. Steps 5 through 10 are a different section. So what I'm going to do is select. If you're creating a protocol from scratch, it's much easier to make sections. Here we have an existing protocol, so I'm going to select these steps and set a new section for them. There we go, it gets a different color. So this is section 2, and then the remainder, I believe, these steps are yet another section. We're not going to do all of it, but just to demonstrate the functionality. And I will say in a moment why it's not just a nice visual thing to set the sections, but how it's helpful. So we've entered different sections. I'm going to go into the view. And as soon as we've done it, not only is there visual separation between the sections, but now it gives us a table of contents, which you can see from the editor or view mode. You can also easily navigate to the section when you're viewing the protocol. It is helpful during the run. So very easy to create sections. And I encourage you to do that, but obviously it takes a second longer. So this is sectioning, and then once you have your protocol in, or if you're creating a new one, you can see down here when you click new, you either create a new step, or you can create a new section. sub-steps, and we'll talk about the step case because that might be a little bit less intuitive. We'll do that in just a moment. You will notice as I mouse over the sections that there are shortcuts, and you can go define your own shortcuts in protocols.io, but you can see, depending on whether you're on a Mac or a PC computer, you'll have different shortcuts. So a new step is just Command-Shift-1. So if I'm here, instead of clicking Create New Step, if I don't want to be using the mouse, I would press Command-Shift-1 and a new step is created. It automatically gets added to whatever section you're in. And if you need to start a new section, you would do that with the click or with the Command-Shift-2 shortcut. All right. So that's all I wanted to say about sectioning. And now I want to direct your attention to the components that you see on the right-hand side. Right now, I'm looking at all of them. If you click on the drop-down, you can select the biology-specific ones, computational components. Most of the components that you'll see in these lists are self-explanatory, right? So duration, amount, temperature, centrifuging, those are self-explanatory. We don't need to play around with them and spend time. But there is one component here that is not as easy to grasp. And that's the smart component. Not because you have to be smart to figure it out, but because it's a component that has some added functionality. So if I am in step 2 going to add the smart component, it basically creates a table. And we'll talk about tables separately, but it is a table with just 2 columns, as many rows as you need, but it is to be filled in as you use the protocol and the run functionality. So I'm adding a row. I'm going to say whether it's required or not. So let's say number of cells that I want to record. This is required. Add a row, % dead. And every time that I run this protocol, that I do the experiment, I want to capture this information. So if I just add the component, it simply looks like multi-row table, column 1, column 2. But once you go into the run functionality and you're actually doing the experiment, here I am on step 1, done with that. Now I'm on step 2, because this is required information. I can't actually advance to step 3 until I say that I've counted 117 cells and 24% of them are dead. Now that I've filled it out, you can see that I am able to advance to the next step. Once you save it, you have a record, not just of when you ran the protocol and when you completed the steps or anything you've edited, but you also have the information. So this is filled in key value pairs. So it's basically a dynamic table that you're filling in as you're running the protocol and you're reminding yourself what's required. You can make these optional or required as needed. And we'll close out of this and go back to our protocol and take a look at the tables. So in step 3, we're going to add a buffer table. Tables are not in the component on the right-hand side menu. Tables are up here. So you can create a new table. That's pretty straightforward. Heading, we all know how to work with tables. The reason I mention it on a tips and tricks webinar is because we actually support formulas. So So if we have H2O, microliters. So instead of just typing in the fields directly, just as in Excel or Google Sheets, if you put an equal sign in front, you could say this is 10. Now you can enter formulas, 10 times cell B2. And if you double click, you'll see the formula, right? So you can now start working. You can now start working with the table. And I also want to show that, of course, you can insert columns, copy the table, add it to another step. But if you have, actually, let's undo this. If you have, it's another row that I wanted. If you have an existing table, whether it's in Excel, of course, you can copy paste. You can copy paste from the table, but what I want to show here is the table I've pasted in. The thing is, if you have an existing table with formulas, I wanted to show that you can easily get it out of Google or Microsoft Excel. The way to do it, so here are the formulas in Google Sheets. If you go to View and you say Show Formulas instead of just the values, it makes it very easy in the Protocols.io editor. If I add a table, right, so 3 columns, 4 rows. Now, if instead of copying and pasting the entire table, if I do that, we should also have the formulas. I'm going to make this bold. So if we double click here, our formulas are in. You can do the exact same thing from Microsoft Excel. The next thing I want to show, we do talk about the importance of videos and how much they help reproducibility when we do our intro webinar. And right now I wanted to show, there are obvious easy things you can do in the editor, which is attach files. We talk about it on our webinar, code components. You can insert images and videos easily. So it is easy to attach links, images, videos, just sort of drag and drop the video in here. But if you are using YouTube or Vimeo, you can also embed the video that you've posted. So if you take your phone into the cold room and you shoot a 30-second video of how to prepare a sample, you can either put it in Protocols.io or if you've uploaded it, say, to YouTube, let's take any video. In order to add,
if you don't travel with your
takes, if you want to add the video from YouTube or another platform, there is, when you go to share, there is the embed option. So what you would do is copy the code from there, go back into the editor and select embed media, copy that code. You don't have to be a computer scientist to do this. You just grab the code from YouTube or another platform, the embed code, put it in, save, and you can see now when you're in view mode, instead of just a link that you can easily add, you have the embedded video right in the step. All right. And we're almost done with the items that I wanted to highlight in the editor, but I did promise to show the case step component. So we'll do that next. Also, because we've created the sections, you can see that we have the same table of contents and the ability to navigate around our protocol easily. And here, you have the history of any changes if you're collaborating. I am as a sole person demoing right now, I cannot demonstrate it, but there is concurrent editing on protocols.io. So if you've shared this protocol with colleagues, you can work and edit at the same time. Right now, it just shows me, but just as in Google Docs, you would see collaborators if you're editing at the same time. We keep track of who made which changes. You can roll them back. And the history is what shows you what changes were entered by which user. So the step case is easy to add. And this is for situations where you have if-then scenarios. So let's imagine that you might have one set of instructions for how to create a buffer if you're doing one sample at a time. But if you're doing 15 samples, you might have a different set of steps. So, or depending on the tissue that you're using. So we're going to say we'll have a step case. We'll give it a title, 1x flow. Sample, add a step case, and now you can see that this step has become more complicated. I can add a new case, say this is 10x. You can add more information, and now you'll see both in the editor and in the viewer, now there is a sort of branching out that's happening at step 19. So if I add new steps, right, there can be 3 steps. There can be a different number of steps in the cases. So this is what I'm doing, mixing together in case I'm not prepping this. And we're going to have just maybe 2 steps, but these are independent flows out of step 19. Right, so I've added the 2 cases. If I go to view and scroll to the bottom, now you can see when you're in the viewer, when you get to the step and run or in the view, you select which case are you looking at, right? So this is the 10x, this is the 1x, different number of steps. And if you're using the run functionality, at this point, you would decide which one are you proceeding down with. If you export, you can also export just one of the cases if you want to print out a PDF, or export both of them. All right. So we'll go back to the editor. There are many other really nice things, of course, formatting. If you have math equations, please note that we have LaTeX, special characters, and then, of course, all of the formatting functionality that you're used to. And the other thing is that we have a lot of visual features that you can add in terms of markers for the steps so that you don't always have to read them, particularly for wet lab methods. So just to note that next to the plus sign is a little menu that allows you to mark a critical step. And when you do that, you can add these graphic labels to the steps that indicate what exactly are you doing in the specific step. So maybe this is overnight incubation. I'm just randomly clicking things, but when you're in the viewer, you then have visual cues of what the step is that remind you if you print it out or if you're running through without having to read all of the text, if this is a protocol that you use frequently. All right. And with that, we will transition out of the editor part and go back to the file manager. Here, what I wanted to mention is about sharing protocols. Of course, if you're in academia, many of you are using protocols.io because you want to get credit for your work. You'll publish. We have nice help pages on publish versus reserve DOI. If you're using protocols.io as part of research article submission flow, there is ability, if you don't want a DOI and you're sharing a provisional protocol, there is an ability to post a draft, which you can still edit, you can come back to, but you can share it, you can tweet it later. Once you publish or reserve a DOI, you are fixing your protocol. So most of these are self-explanatory. We have good information on that. What I do want to say is, if you're not ready to make it public, use the share button. Of course, in a workspace, you can invite collaborators into the workspace, but there are situations where you want to share with someone who is not part of your research team. You don't want them to have access to all of your infrastructure and all of your protocols, but there's a specific one you want to share. So you can select one or more in bulk, one or more protocols from a folder, click the share button, and you can share it by email with individuals. Right, so that person will get a notification. You can select what kind of access they have. Is it view only or edit, or their co-administrator on it? So you can share with specific people. If you belong to multiple workspaces, you don't need to drag your protocol from one to another. If you want to share to a different team, to a different workspace that you belong to, you can also do that easily. And again, set what kind of sharing you're doing and what access they have. So you can have multiple workspaces that the protocol is visible in. And something that you might not always notice is that if you don't want to ask the people to create an account on protocols.io, and you just want to give them a private link at the very top, we call it a reviewer link. Click on that, and you can grab, we tell you what the difference is, but you can grab a private link to a protocol, which if you share with someone, you didn't make it public, you can still delete, you can still edit the protocol. It's not indexed by Google Scholar. It doesn't appear with the DOI in Crossref. It is not searchable on protocols.io. Only the people, it's kind of like unlisted in YouTube, only the people with the link will have access to it. And they don't need an account. If they have the link, that's why we call it reviewer link. You can use it as part of your publishing process if you're academic. So grab that, share it with anyone, and they don't need to register. They don't need an account. It will just open for them. If you're submitting to a journal that has double-blind peer review, you also have the option to get a blind review link, which then takes your name and affiliations off, and you can submit in a style consistent with double-blind peer review. So those are some of the sharing options. And before I switch over to the Q&A, I can see there's some questions already, which is fantastic. But before I switch over to the Q&A, I also wanted to point to the copy fork button. Any protocol, if you're looking at any public protocol on protocols.io, you can make a clone of it. If you're working with liver cells and I'm working with kidney cells, we might have slight differences. So that's what the fork button is for. There is the compare and contrast functionality that applies to forks. So you can take any protocol that you see on the public or in private side of protocols.io, create a copy. So everything is basically a template. It's open access, and you can use other people's protocols as a fork. For your own protocols, you also have the option to have a copy. And what is the difference between them? When would you create a new version? When would you create a copy or fork? The new version is for updating an existing protocol, right? Maybe you've shared it publicly previously and it has a DOI. If you have corrections and optimizations, or you're coming back to a protocol you had 3 months ago and you have substantial changes to it, not just slight grammar issues or corrections, public or private, you can create a new version, right? So for updating an existing protocol, you create a new version. If it's a branch, different tissue, different organism, different equipment that you're using, or if you're working with somebody's public protocol, you would do copy fork. And once you click on that, you have on your private protocol, you have the option of either making a fork or making a copy. So the copy part, I think we have a help page on this. The copy part specifically is for the instances where you're creating a collection, where you have a number of protocols you want to group together, maybe as part of sharing with someone or as part of publishing. But make a copy is good if you don't want the relationship between protocols. So if you make a fork, the protocol will point back and will say, here's the original, this is what it was forked from. You will be able to use the compare button to see which steps are the same, which ones are different. However, when you make a copy, there is no relationship. So the instance where you would use a copy is if you are trying to create a collection and you have a lot of common information. Let's say you have 10 protocols, buffers, computational protocols, experimental, and you have all the same authors, all the same affiliations, the same abstract, the same keywords, and you don't want to fill that out protocol by protocol, you can create a base template, which you then click copy on instead of fork, and then you would group the protocols together. And in order to group protocols together, you just click create new collection. And here we are in the demo. I'm going to create a new collection, and this allows you to choose just from your own files or from public protocols. And this is a modular way you can, I think I mistyped. That's why this is a modular way for you to create containers, put protocols together, change the order. And what that is helpful with is if you're publishing a paper, you can have 10 different protocols, and here you can get a single DOI, single citation for them, add it to the method section of your paper, and say, please find additional details here. So we'll show you an example. So here is a protocol that belongs to a collection. I can click on this, and if you navigate to the collection, this is a public collection. It's part of a paper that was published in PLOS Biology. And it's a great example. If you go to materials and methods, you'll see that at the top of materials and methods, they say the details for how we work with Drosophila, how we prepared the media, and other items are available as a collection. So you don't need to add 10 different links to the protocols. You group the 10 protocols together in a collection. There's a single link, single DOI, and when you navigate to it, here are all of the different protocols that accompany that publication. So in a case like this, instead of adding all the different authors and all of the abstracts to each protocol individually or keywords for discoverability, you create a template, fill out the information, and then use the copy to make the different protocols that will go into the collection. So we have 10-15 minutes left for the webinar, and I am going to stop here and take a look at the questions we already have. Nora, you have your hand raised. So let's see if I can just unmute folks. Go ahead.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Hi, thank you for these explanations. I have a question specific to our lab at the moment, I guess. We're in the process of building tables to keep track of metadata for our experiments. And basically the situation is as follows, where we're all following the same protocol. So we do acute slicing. Right?
Yep.
So live brain slices. And for example, the composition of the ACSF varies from person to person or from experiment to experiment. So my idea was to have a base protocol and then to create forks where each fork has an update of like the ACSF composition was exactly this or exactly that. Does that make sense? Or should
It
these
does, and you can definitely do that. But my recommendation in this particular case, and you can also jump on a one-on-one call with our demo if we don't have time to fully cover it. But my recommendation would be for the case that you're describing, you create the base protocol, and instead of creating tons of forks and then trying to navigate between them, I would recommend just using the run button. So you can create a new record of it in real time, or say, this is what we did last week. And in that instance, you save it in a folder, right? And you have all of the details that you want, the metadata that you want to keep track of. You're not changing the base protocol, but you have a record of the metadata that accompanies that particular date.
Gotcha.
So that I think is probably a great application of the run functionality.
So I do have a question there. So the run data, that's saved in like a table format, or what is the format of that?
You can have tables in the steps, right? And you can edit at runtime and fill in the table at runtime. So then once you save it, you'll have it in the file manager in the folder where you've decided to put it, but you'll have the filled out table in that run record.
So each individual run is a new file?
Correct.
Because basically what we're thinking is to use a SQL type database to have that information. Right? And then because we did notice that Protocols.io has a nice API as well. So we were wondering if we could marry those two together.
Absolutely. We might need, because this is a specific use case, we would love for you to use the API. We might need to schedule a separate call for this use case. I've done SQL programming as well. My background is in bioinformatics and computational for the experimental, but we might need an additional call. I want to make sure that I can get to other people's questions as well.
Yes, of course.
But you might be right that there might be, if you're using the API, you might want a different workflow. So we might want to connect and look into that.
Thank you very much. I'll make sure to be in touch if we ever get there, but basically I should look at runs rather than forks or copies.
I think runs would work well, and you can get to them through the API. But I really appreciate your question and the time you took to listen to the webinar.
Of course.
There's also a question, just shooting through what's already in the Q&A. There's a question that says, have there been any changes to what rights we retain for the protocols we upload? We have a terms of service. We don't, from 2014 when we launched, we've always been really clear that we have no rights to your protocol. The content is yours. So I think if you can see my screen. If you go to terms of use, right there is the ownership, right? And we make it very clear. We have no rights to the material you provide. It's yours. You can delete it. Obviously, if you've published it, it's just like publishing a research article. You cannot delete it and get rid of it. So you agree to CC BY license if you share publicly, but any material you put into Protocols.io is yours. It's secure. It's protected. We're GDPR compliant. You can easily export it to your computer, to other cloud services, move it, delete it. It is your content, and there has been no change to this part since we launched Protocols.io in 2014. Let me know if I answered the question or if there are other details. Then there is a question, is it CME credit for this webinar? Sorry, I know what CME credits are. We do have certificates we can issue for attending our webinars, but this is not a accredited CME event. So this is really platform training. Sorry that I didn't see the question at the beginning. Will the recording of this be available? Absolutely. Everyone who registered later tomorrow, we'll send out a link to a YouTube video of this webinar, to the slides. And then there is a question, what is the difference between publish and reserve DOI? And after publishing, could you unpublish it? So fantastic question. If you're academic and you might be, I think I'm still sharing the screen. If you're academic and you might be sharing the protocol publicly, let's go back to the file manager. You didn't miss it, whoever asked the question. I just didn't go over it. So there is the publish and there is reserve DOI. Very similar. If I click on reserve DOI, you can see that there is a workflow. You can see that there is a workflow where we ask you to fill out your affiliation, authors, funders, things you would expect if you're publishing a paper. You would acknowledge, your funders, make sure that you have the abstract. If there is no funder acknowledgement, you just breeze through authors. And one thing that's particular to Protocols.io in the publishing workflow is we ask you to sort of self-certify, label the protocol. Is it something that works robustly in your hands? Are you still developing it and trying to get it to work? Is it a negative result where you tried to get it to work but couldn't? And then whether it's research or not, you can add a additional detail on whichever one you select. You can add additional details. So this is publishing workflow. It is very similar to reserve DOI. Let's see, preview. This is my protocol. Next, before I publish, I need to certify that my co-authors and my advisor, if any, are okay with making this public. And you acknowledge that this will give you a DOI, this will go public, and you will not be able to edit this particular protocol. So once you agree to this and you make it public, this will go live. It will be visible in Google Scholar. It'll get indexed and it's fully live, right? So those are the acknowledgements. Not acknowledgement. That's the publishing workflow. The difference between that and the reserve DOI is the same workflow, but if instead of clicking publish, if I click reserve DOI, at the very end, you'll get your DOI, but the protocol doesn't go fully public. So you get a reserve DOI. We don't send information to Crossref. It doesn't go to mirror sites. It doesn't get archived and internet archive. It is still a private protocol. You have a DOI that you can put into the paper if you're submitting it. You'll have a private link as part of that. Let me actually show exactly how this looks. because it's so simple to do. So you can see all the same workflow. Preview. And if I'm going to say reserve DOI, it is not going public yet. Right? Here's the reviewer link. And you can wait until your paper is accepted. You can add this into the materials and methods, whether it's a collection or a single protocol, you can add it to the paper. Reviewers will be able to access the protocol. This is the DOI if and when the paper is accepted and you do feel comfortable making your protocol public. This is the DOI that you'll have. But the protocol is not fully public yet. Only the people with this link will be able to access it. Once the paper is accepted and you feel comfortable, you'll come back, you'll have the publish button at the top, and you'll convert it from a private protocol with a reserved DOI to fully public protocol with this DOI being registered in Crossref, this going live, your protocol being sent to archiving repositories, Internet Archive, clocks, mirrors that we collaborate with, so that your protocol will be distributed to multiple places for access. But both are very similar workflows, but reserved DOI is for the instances where you're submitting a paper but are not ready until the review is done. You don't feel comfortable for whatever reason making it fully public. So I think we've answered that. Recording of the workshop. And there are a few more questions. Then there's a question which says, with the growing prevalence of AI scraping, is Protocols.io protected from this? Good question. You are protected if your protocols are private. We have pharmaceuticals that use Protocols.io. Food and Drug Administration in the United States uses Protocols.io, United States Department of Agriculture. So we are paranoid about guarding your information. Private protocols are not visible to Google. They're not visible to anyone but you and the people you've explicitly shared your protocol with. So we have a whole security white paper. So there's a security section on Protocols.io. This is a summary of the work that we do to guard and keep your information yours. There's a whole white paper, as I said, that you can link through to. I will add the link here. So your information, your protocols are yours. They will not be scraped and used by anyone unless you make it public. That said, any protocol that you make public, it is open access. It is available through our API. It can be reused, repurposed. It's the same as publishing your paper in +1. It does become available to the public, academic, or industry. It can feed into AI, it can feed into machine learning, and that is the purpose of open access. Sharing is for that reuse and building on. So if you don't want it to be scraped, keep it private, share private links with collaborators. If you do make it public, then it is an open access CC BY license and it can be reused. So that's the question there. Let's see if there are any open ones. I think there are some in chat. Oh, just a comment that the blind review link is clever. Kudos to the people on the team that came up with that. Thank you. I will pass it on to the team. But on that note, I don't want us to take credit for the blind review link. I want to give credit to the researchers like yourselves who are attending this webinar and who are giving us suggestions and making requests. That from day one has been a critical part of Protocols.io, is the feedback and input from the users. That's how we can make the platform better. And I think it was one or more people who were using Protocols.io and needed to submit to journals that do double-blind peer review. So I'll give credit to my colleagues, the director of engineering, who has been co-founder from day one when we started this effort, Alexei, for implementing it, but the credit for the feature is from users like yourselves. And we really welcome feedback and input. On all of the pages of Protocols.io, you can ask a question. You can easily get in touch with us by email or through Protocols.io itself. And you will notice when you are, I know we're almost at time, but you will notice that when you're using Protocols.io, for example, it's not just the help and emailing us, but when you're using Protocols.io, like the components, if you scroll down, you'll see a note that says, didn't find a component that you need, request it. We have a weekly brainstorming session where we go through your emails, where we go through your suggestions and requests, and that is the part that makes Protocols.io a tool that is friendly and relevant to the people that are actually in the research field right now. I haven't been in the bench for 10, actually 11 years now. So it's thanks to your feedback, input, and the people joining the webinars and really the power users. That's who gets credit for a lot of the functionality that you see on Protocols.io. All right, any in the last minute that we have? And then there's a question about CME. Again, the person who is asking about CME credit, this is not an official CME credit event. Sorry about that. We can provide a certificate that you've attended the training, but I don't think that this counts towards CME credit. Sorry about that. All right, and then if there are no other questions, we'll stop the recording.